This is the Not So Korean podcast, and I am Jason Verney.
And this is Timothy Holm.
In this podcast series, we talk to one another, and sometimes with special guests, about what we know about Korea,
What we don't know about Korea,
what we want to know about Korea,
and occasionally what we don't want to know about Korea.
Yep, recording live from UK's Koreatown itself. That's an area in and around New Malden. That's the largest Koreatown and Korean community in Europe. We always start the episodes off with a quick summary of our last few days or week or whatever. So this one, we're going to be a little bit different from one or two other episodes. I normally pass this over to Tim, and he then passes this over to me. But this particular thing, the thing that we were up to, we were meeting a couple of friends and what we would call, and they would call themselves, I'm sure, experts on Korea. Tim, do you want to just tell us who they are, as in their names?
Yeah, so one is Dami Aniola, and she's from Gugak Sounds, another podcast which is about traditional Korean music. And Diya Mitra from Korea.net, and she also has her own website and works for, as I said, Korea.net. She writes articles for them,
Yeah, that's right. And Diya, if you put, some of you might already know her on social media. She's got a nice sort of ring to her name. It's Diya on Korea. That's how her sort of her social media handle is. What she's known as on Facebook, etc. And I think also Tim just touched on something that Dami Enolia used to run. I think she might be continuing, but at the moment I'm not sure if she's doing it, but it's Gugak Sounds. It might be a podcast, but I think it was more a radio show, but it might, you could still get it in the usual places. So what happened was we'd scheduled to go to London, something as a rare occasion these days. I've probably been up in London in about 16 months. I've probably been up there 3 times, and Tim's been up there almost, what would you say, the same?
Yeah, I've only been there a couple of times in the past year or so, but yeah, we should specify central London, because technically we are living in London, or Greater
London.
Yes.
So me and Tim, we might have mentioned this on another podcast, because we have this thing about, this is also, where New Malden is, it's in Surrey, but a lot of people... It's also in Greater London, so, but yes, we went to central London. We arranged to meet Diya, and we arranged to meet Dami, and we basically conducted a couple of interviews. But what we're going to do today is just basically give a bit of background about how we know Diya and Dami, and then what we're going to do is going to play a little snippet of interview from that day. So perhaps we should talk about you, Tim, and how you met, let's just say how you met Diya, because,
Yeah. Well, Diya, I think I've known her almost, 8 years, 9 years now, maybe. It was at I'm trying to think when the very first time was. But
yeah, I'm struggling myself, actually.
Yeah, I do remember especially us all going to the London Book Fair, where the Korea was the market-focused country of that year, 2012.
I think it was 2014.
Oh, sorry,
yeah,
2014.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's 7 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I've known her at least 7 years, but I think it might have been 8 years. And so we went to several events at that book fair together, and including Jason.
Yep.
And I think that's the first time that I can recall.
Yeah, I was actually when I was trying to think when I met Diya, it might have been at the KCC itself, because we used
probably was.
Yeah. She's been going to probably events there, or at least associated with the KCC and events there for probably longer than I have, and Tim as well. Yeah. So, but that was actually an eventful year for lots of things. But for the book fair, yes, there was we met up with Philip Goman. He was there.
And who is Philip Goldman, just for people who don't know?
Yeah, just to refresh you from, we've mentioned this once or twice, but Philip Goldman runs the brilliant website LondonKoreanLinks.net, and he's basically any event that you that's happening in the UK and someone's been kind enough to inform him or that he's found out about, there will be something on that website about it. There's a calendar that tells you every day there's something on about Korea, whether it's events relating to mostly South Korea, I guess, and also North Korea as well, whether that's films, art, and etc. But yes, there was also, we hung around with Lewin, I think she had a website, and one others, but we did hang around a lot with Diya. I also, just to maybe a perhaps interesting fact, I did manage to, when I was in Korea, one of my trips there, been there 7 times now, but so far, if the world gets back to normal, I'll have an 8th trip, and Tim used to live there, as he will elaborate another time. But I met up briefly with Diya there, which was a great moment because we're both sort of into Korean culture. And, you know, it was great to meet up with her, some of her friends that she met up with as well. But also myself and Diya, we'll get on to Dami in a second. We did one or two collaborations, and one of them was with a Korean indie band known as Juk Grungy.
Right.
So we did a lot video interview, which was, I remember us doing it, myself and Diya. It was a very noisy coffee shop. We had to sort of play around with the editing quite a bit, which actually
we might have to do that again this time, because we had an interview. Well, I had an interview with her in a busy park in the middle of Soho.
Yeah.
And so there was this dog that kept barking during the interview, and you might hear some of that later on. Maybe not in the clip that we play for you today, but possibly in the longer interview later.
Yep.
In maybe the next episode or the next episode.
Yeah, and that's correct. So Tim sort of, we went off our separate ways that day. I had to go somewhere else and meet someone else, but I sort of conducted the interview with Dami, and again, what started off as a great quiet little place turned into a slightly noisier place. So we might have to do some sound engineering with that, with the interviews themselves. But that's why we thought, as a kind of brief introduction, that we will play a snippet of each interview, and then in a future episode, not too long from now, we will play that interview, the full interview. We might even have them on again. They seem to be happy to do that, which is always good to hear. But shall we move on to Dami?
Yeah, sure.
So I know you met her.
Yeah, I think you know her better than I do, but I met her for the first time at SOAS, which is the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. We were taking a Korean course there, actually. It was an advanced Korean course, so it was like for a few months. But I just remember that she was always talking a lot in the class, and her Korean ability was obviously much better than mine or any of the other students in the class. She always had a lot of interesting questions and things, but most of the rest of us were just keeping quiet. But so obviously, I mean, I think her Korean is probably fluent at this point.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, she's well into it, and she will the clip we play will sort of allude to how, you know, will sort of give a bit of information to how she got into the Korean culture, or at least what she's doing right now. And a similar thing with Diya. I think I met Dami possibly around the same time. I think we were discussing it with Dami at the day of the interview, but although we saw each other a few times at SOAS, I think I might have met her at some function around a Korean friend's house. I think it was to do with the Korean Artists Association, because she was sort of mixed in with that as well. She knows all kinds of instruments. Chango is the drum that she knows very well. She loves the gayagum, as she'll explain in one of the clips. And she commissioned me once to film her event at SOAS, an event that she was putting on with her teacher, a good sort of acquaintance of mine, good friend. And and again, I did actually meet her in SNU, which is Seoul National University, which she will talk about as well. Basically, my last trip, well, one of my last trips anywhere, we met at the university. It's a massive place, and you probably know it, Tim. You must have been to SNU. You've been there before too. Yeah, I thought you would have done.
Yeah, it's quite a big university, but it's not in a very convenient location.
You have to get buses there.
It's sort of in the mountains almost, But it's nice scenery around there.
Yeah, it's a bit of an effort to... It's lovely there. I mean, the campus itself, but I had to get... There's what they call it, a shuttle bus to and from, or I could have walked, but it would have taken ages. So, we've... and I think also she... Sorry, I think she definitely had a couple of years ago before COVID hit. She also had some music, a sort of an art exhibition. She's so talented. I mean, she's a very good music. She knows her music, Korean music. She knows her Korean language. She's an artist, and she's run a radio show and all this kind of stuff. She knows her things. Yeah. So I think we would probably... Shall we move on to one of the...
Shall we play a clip from her interview now so she can introduce herself?
Yeah. Let's... So we'll do... Yeah, we'll play a clip from Dami just discussing things, and then we'll be able to talk a bit more.
My name is Dami, and I'm a music composer. I got into Korean music, roughly about 10 years now. And I've played lots of Korean traditional music instruments. I'm very interested in Korean traditional music, and I played lots of Korean traditional music instruments. I've had the opportunity to perform on various stages with very famous people as well, which has been a blessing, and I'm grateful for. I currently am studying at Seoul National University, doing a master's in Korean traditional music composition.
Okay, so that was Dami, and that's just a tiny snippet of the conversation we had with her on a few days ago. If the audio is sort of a bit up and down, that's because the sound engineering needs to be done. But so that was really, she had a lot of insightful things to say, and in the next, in the future episode, you will hear that. But next we will go to Diya and a few things that she had to say.
So, hi, my name is Diya Mitra. I run a website which is called Diya on Korea, and I trying to think about when I started getting interested in Korean culture. So it began when I worked for a coffee company that should remain nameless, and at the time there were a lot of Koreans actually working in, and this was in London. And through them, obviously, as you get to know your colleagues, I became very good friends with one of them. And I started learning about Korea and Korean culture. And when I say that, I got interested in the films and the food, and those were the main things. And when I started watching the films, I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. And I can't remember some of the names of the films because I'm terrible at names. But some of them were like My Sassy Girl, those older films. And it was like this very sweet, innocent culture. I know that's not a way of summing it up.
So, that was Diya and the dog, as you could hear, in the park in Soho.
Yeah.
And so we may have to edit that out later, but we'll see. Anyway, so we were... Basically, just before we had this interview, we went to a new sort of Korean restaurant called Wing Wing. It's a chicken place for chimek, what they call chimek, which is chicken and beer.
Yeah.
I think they have several branches, and the first branch is actually like a few years old, I think, but this one's near Tottenham Court Road.
Yeah, near... Charing Cross Road.
Yeah, and it's also close to another place that we went to called Bunshik.
Yeah, Timothy and Diya went off to Wing Wing later on, and myself, Tim, and Diya we experienced Bunshik, which is what Tim just mentioned. That one So, I mean, I can talk. I mean, Wing Wing, I don't know how different it is to other chimek, sort of, Korean chicken things. But with Bunsik, I can definitely talk a little bit about what that experience was like.
Because as I recall, you were not too impressed by it. Is that right, Jason?
Well, I think first of all, okay, going to get my soapbox now. I mean, first of all, I suppose it is Korean in the fact that it's very Korean these days.
Do you want to explain exactly what?
And I will. I was coming to that. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
I was just biding my time for some reason. Yeah. But yeah, so but it's kind of basically like corn dogs on a stick, basically anything put on a stick, which is, I think, I mean, you can probably, obviously you're from Canada as opposed to America, but USA rather, but you are familiar with these. Yeah. But it's become a Korean thing, and we've mentioned in a previous podcast the shop in Kingston, the eatery in Kingston called Hara.
Horangi, which means tiger in Korean.
Yeah, tiger. They don't have tigers on a stick.
No, unfortunately.
Not as far as I know, unless they're getting desperate.
But it is basically a similar thing to Bunshik. But Horangi came first, didn't it? At least in London.
At least in Kingston.
Greater London.
Yeah. But Bunshik, I mean, I wasn't not impressed. I mean, for the money you pay. I don't eat meat these days. I eat fish, but so I chose the cheese and potato one. The cheese wasn't as cheesy as I was hoping it would be. Obviously, it was mozzarella, wasn't it? Right. I think, I think just this place is very known for now, or at least since it started anyway. It's for queues, sort of long queues, as a lot of these places are. They kind of, especially in central London, it's kind of becomes a fad or kind of a
trendy
trend.
Place.
It's and we all had something different, I guess. Tim had something, and Diya
I had something called like the octopus, something like that. But there's no actual octopus in it.
No, it wasn't a scene from Old Boy.
No, it's just cheese deep fried with some pieces of sausage. That are meant to look like octopus legs.
Yeah, like tentacles. But it did take ages. I mean, it did. That your one, even though we got ours. Actually, I got mine pretty quick. I made it was potato and cheese. It didn't have to. Well, I was say kill an animal, but no. But your one did take forever. We were waiting.
I mean, as you said, it's a very popular place, and. There was when we got there was like a huge queue outside, and we thought, oh, do we have to wait like an hour to get in there?
Yeah, it was a bit confusing at first, wasn't it?
But then we realized that people were just waiting for their orders, and actually we could go in and we could make our own order, but then we just have to wait outside.
Yeah, so we actually got lucky with that, and we're not criticising Bunsik here. I mean, you can find them on Instagram, and and you'll see what they do. But no, I mean, I guess it was just not what I was anticipating. Yeah. But it was a good sort of novelty thing to do and go to. Rather, we're going to central London, we might as well check out. But also that area, we were talking about the area, how it's become because.
Not quite a mini Koreatown, but there are several Korean businesses around there. There's aside from Bunshik and Wing Wing, there's also the what was it again? The
where further
around
down?
Tottenham Court Road and Charing Cross
there was
area.
kimchi before, wasn't there? There
used to be a kimchi. Now there's a Oseo also. Oseo. And there's also that. Oseo is like a Korean grocery.
Yeah, it's a spin-off. Isn't it a spin-off from H Mart?
Yes, right.
Spin-off.
Yeah,
but
H Mart owns Oseo, branches of Oseo.
Yes, you've got those there.
So you've got those, and then there's also the Nature Republic, which is a Korean cosmetics.
Oh yeah, it's cosmetics.
Thing.
Yeah.
Not that
I tend not to go there.
Really,
no, I didn't have time. That's the only reason.
But speaking of cosmetics, there was also a K-beauty pop-up shop just around the corner in Soho, and your favorite.
Well, I'm not going to say it, but seeing as we're talking about cosmetics, and for show, there was apparently to Tim. I had left by this time to go somewhere else, but Tim had stumbled across a K-pop. What was it? Giving out K-pop?
Yeah, it's called Soko Lab, and they sell like K-pop merchandise as well as Korean cosmetics. And this particular day that I was there, they had a huge queue outside, even longer than the Bunshik queue.
Yeah, wow.
And so I was wondering, what are all these people doing there? So me and Diya, we went up to them, a couple of people in the queue, and we asked them, so what are you waiting for? And they said, we're waiting for these free K-pop posters. So I don't know if it was for BTS or another group.
Maybe it was for Blackpink because of the film being out.
Yeah,
oh God,
it's
I can't believe I've said the word, but yeah.
Yeah, I probably should have stayed around to find out, but I wasn't that interested. As you know, I'm not a huge K-pop.
No, we're both
either.
not huge K-pop endorsers.
But it was interesting just to see how many people are really, so into that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean it's good. I mean the weird thing as well about that part of town, if you want to call it, people say town, London, whatever, but. Is that this little strip of eateries and Korean venues is kind of replacing the ones that disappeared due to Crossrail, the ones that were further up, near Tottenham Court Road. People might remember there was Wujang, I think it was called. There was Seoul Bakery, a small little bakery, and there was, of course, there was a little mini supermarket place. What was that called? It was.
Yeah, I forget the name of it.
And there was one more restaurant. I'm trying to think of the name. Another restaurant that was in the same area as Wujang. And there was a Korean hairdressers.
Yeah, and Seoul Bakery.
That's it.
Well.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
But I don't know. This is just coincidence, and maybe it's jumping on not the bandwagon, but it's kind of this street food has become maybe more popular and sort of it's easier. Maybe it's easier to rent a place that's street food. You don't have the seating thing, whereas before it's restaurants, and I can't imagine how much it costs now to rent a restaurant, a sit-down restaurant in central London. And in fact, speaking of that, there was also just while I think of it, this wasn't in the same area, but was it Jinju? That's all closed down now, isn't it, or moved?
Jinju.
Is it Jinju?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The one that used to be in near Liberty, near what's that street called? Near Carnaby Street,
that's a
Kingly
Korean
Street
restaurant. All right.
Yes, yeah. But anyway, there's one there. But we're drifting off the topic. But Tim did wander up
also
to...
near Tottenham Court Road is the Foyles Bookshop, which is one of the most famous bookshops in London.
Yeah,
they have like several floors, but on one of them they have like books from different countries, right? Different languages.
Yeah, world literature, I suppose.
Yeah, and one section is devoted to Korean literature and Korean language learning books, so... Yeah, we just popped in there, we had a little look, and I think they expanded that section a little bit, at least since they started it, so they do seem to have quite a decent selection, both with, books in English, translated from Korean, and also Korean language books, right?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I've been in there and seen a few, but I've probably been with Diya or somebody when I've walked in there, and I often see maybe... her post a picture or you post a picture. I can't remember of their section, but if it's got bigger, then that can only be a good thing.
Right.
Actually, speaking of which, something else I've just remembered that I probably could have covered earlier. But I recently, because the Korean Cultural Centre in London, KCC UK, they're doing a book club, sort of reading group. And one of them, we did touch on this, I think, in another episode, the book Grass, which is basically a animated, not animated, what do you call it?
Novel.
Graphic novel by the author Kum Suk Gendry Kim. That's how I pronounce it. And I did decide to order her graphic novel of Jisoo, which is... Jisoo. Tim's always better at pronouncing many of these words. And I ordered that the graphic novel because I love the film. It's about Jeju Sasam, the Jeju, the 4/3 uprising, sort of the massacre on Jeju, which happened many decades ago. Well, not that long ago, but anyway. And I just was fascinated because I love that book Grass, which is about comfort women and other subjects. And I went to order it. Didn't realise the place I ordered it from that there was the French edition. So I got it home, opened it up. It looked beautiful. Everything looked beautiful. Then I sort of realised that the words that were coming out, the captions weren't. They were only like rat tat tat or bang bang bang, but they were actually the words. They weren't Korean. They were some other version. And then I realised that yes, it was the French edition I bought, but apparently it is only available in France and of course Korea.
Right.
So maybe I'll understand the French one better than I would the Korean. I mean, you'd probably understand the Korean.
These days you can use Google Translate. Pretty much, you can translate French into English pretty easily. I think.
If it was reading from a Kindle or something, maybe I could copy and paste, but I can't really.
Yeah, the other option would be I translate the Korean into English for you, but you'll have to pay me for that.
Yeah, that's the other option. You know, Tim's on the ball here, on the money, literally.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, it was an interesting day.
Yeah.
You know, and things didn't necessarily go to plan, but we got everything we needed, even if we need to tidy up the audio. But so what we'll do next is we'll just end the show. Well, slowly end the show because we've got a few things to cover. Some sort of news, Korean news. So whether that's local news or Korean-related news in general.
Yeah.
So do you want to start with this, or are you going to say something else?
Yeah, just to mention another thing that we did recently was involving the KBCE, which is the Korean British Cultural Exchange, and we mentioned this in a previous episode. But we are doing some new projects with them involving video. And so, do you want to talk about the one that we did recently?
Yeah, basically we were going to cover it at the beginning, but we wanted to get straight into the Dami and Diya story. But we thought if we included this at the end with the news, because this is news of forthcoming items, video items. But we did a project with KBC, but it was also with social media, what do you call it, social media mini giant, Hanguk Hapa.
Yeah.
So that's Hanguk Hapa. You might have seen her on Instagram or on Facebook or what have you, and even on her YouTube channel. And basically, the member of the KBCE and us three, myself, Tim, and Hanguk Hapa, we were involved with filming and also taking part in the washing. Basically, it's the stages of washing rice. So basically, there's various stages of washing rice traditionally that's done. So whether that's I don't want to give too much away. Some of you will know this, I'm sure. But there's
Korean
different
people might know this, but not necessarily British people or Western people.
One or two others might do, but we can't be the only ones.
So they usually wash it at least 3 to 4 times, maybe more than that.
And then some elements are used because I don't want to give too much away, but they might use certain waters, drainage, let's call it, in the nicest way.
They used the used water, or the water that they use for the washing, right?
Yeah.
They reuse it.
That's right. They reuse it. They might use it on sort of skin, or they reuse it on sort of helping other nature's plants or creatures to grow. So, but we did that, and then we also took part in a little conversation, but also we took part in the tasting. So we did a little taste. There's the different variations of cooking you can get. For example, you can have the rice cooker. This is the modern way these days. The dolsot, which is a stone bowl. People might know that from bibimbap and that such. And of course the pan, which is, we would call it a saucepan or pot. But we did a taste and see which ones we liked the most out of those. And it went pretty well. It took longer than we expected, but these things always do, I think.
That was really interesting. And just to taste the different textures of the rice and the moisture and all that stuff was interesting. Then we had a big feast after that of Korean food. We weren't expecting it, but the kind lady who showed us how to wash and cook the rice, she kindly prepared this Korean food for us.
She was so sweet. Yeah, she was really good, and she took part in interviews as well, and she just had a lot of time for us, which was very good. Yeah. But leading on from that, we sort of almost within a day or so, I can't remember when it was now, but it's almost in the same area as where that took part. We soon found ourselves in Worcester Park, and we found this. It's a martial arts venue or sort of teaching place, and it's also a Korean tea place, and they do tea from Jeju, and they have other kinds of tea there, but they also do archery. But it's actually interesting because this place we hadn't actually seen before. It's actually known as SKMA Health Centre, but also what's the other name? It's
Hapkido, which is basically the name of a Korean traditional martial art, it's like the Hapkido Center in Worcester Park. Yeah,
that's right. So,
and Worcester Park is not so far away from New Malden.
No,
in case people don't know.
Yeah, we've touched on this very briefly before, but the Korean community stretches out to Worcester Park and quite a bit further. But we went in there, and they do know the people that run the place that we've mentioned briefly before as well. The place in New Malden called Choice, or that's at Che''CE, which is also a cake and coffee with martial arts place, and they know each other, and I believe this one in Worcester Park came first. And so we're going to go back there, have some Jeju tea or peppermint tea.
Green tea. Yeah.
But it was basically, Worcester Park High Street's got a lot to offer, but there's not a great deal of Korean things, even though there's a lot of Korean community there. There's a big Korean community, but we were very pleasantly surprised to find this place. Yeah. I think we'd seen it briefly before, but we'd wandered past it in a hurry.
And it's certainly the first place that I've seen around here to teach actual Korean archery. And speaking of Korean archery...
Oh, yes. We have one other story in the news at the end of this, towards the end of this podcast. We've... archery, as Tim says, there was the Olympics. So we've got the if you haven't heard already, you're hearing now... Korea did pretty well with the archery, in the archery. And it was An San was the actual individual woman who did so well. And she apparently is the first South Korean to win more than 2 medals in a single Summer Games. So that's quite an achievement. But she's also, if that wasn't enough, she's also the first woman since 1904, I believe, to win 3 gold medals in archery at the same Olympics. So that's quite a feat.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But on the other side of things, although that's some great news, there was some males out there, some South Korean men who were being a bit abusive online about her short hair. It was something, I think it was to... where basically in turn it triggered out sort of an outpouring of support from women. They were infuriated of her treatment. I don't blame them. I mean, that's just, it's just obviously talking about her hair. I don't understand where that came from. I guess they were suggesting she was a feminist and demanded that she apologise.
Yeah,
I mean, that does sound
for having a short haircut. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean, she never said that she was even a feminist, I don't think, as far as I know. And even if she was, why is that an issue? You can't you be an Olympic gold medalist if you're a feminist? I mean, this just doesn't make sense.
I mean, and it does resonate with a couple of other stories I've heard, or we've probably both heard, from Korea, South Korea, that sometimes when the men online could get in these sort of boys' clubs and start almost bullying or harassing.
Yeah, it is, basically.
And it's kind of... And I'm not saying it doesn't happen in this country, but there are stories and parallels with other things that have happened in the past. We won't go into in this episode, but we're more than happy to in the future ones.
It's just sad to see that kind of thing happen, especially to somebody who's brought so much, to be celebrated for her country.
It's great,
It's amazing.
It's almost like she can't do anything. She's only doing her sport and something she loves doing.
Yeah.
There was also, while I think about it, there's also some news about a football team, Andrew, who we're going to have as a guest in the future. Sorry, someone we know, mentioned about was it Tottenham Hotspurs, a Korean person who had done very well?
Yeah.
I haven't got the story here, though.
Unfortunately, we're not big football fans either.
Yeah,
so we don't know all the recent news. But...
We'll try and maybe update you on that for the next episode. But I think with all that, this episode is essentially regarding Dami and Diya. but for a future episode there'll be a lot more from them.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to, do what we usually do, which is introduce you to our last week, some Korean news, and also the main subject being, as I said, Dami and Diya. So I don't know what else. Is there anything else you want to add apart from saying farewell?
No, just a big thank you to Dami and Diya for meeting us this past week, and we will...
That was such a great time as well, yeah.
Yeah, we'll surely include more of your interviews in the coming episodes, so look forward to that.
Yeah, and one last thing on that, we have got one or two other interviews already sort of in the pipeline, which is also good. And also thanks again for the kind words that we've been getting on YouTube channel and also just in comments. So we'll, thanks for listening, and we'll just play out with the usual music from the band Kaya.
And 안녕히 계세요.
Yeah, and we'll play out with Kaya and New Ararang from their album Korean Breeze.